Okay, I'm going to walk you right through some steps here in Unity. First thing I'm going to do is from this PowerPoint how we can get a GUI to respond when a target is hit. So what that means is I've got to have a shooter. So let's just start at the beginning here. I do have a shooter, and I'm going to show you how I made that. This is for anybody who's got lost somewhere along the way. This is a shooter. And I'm going to show you my script for that. There it is. Let's open it up. I'm using MonoDevelop, but you can use whatever you want as long as it'll edit JavaScript or C#. And there it is. So this is the code for shooter. And all we're doing here is we've got a variable called bullet, we've got a variable called power. We can adjust both of those. We're saying during the input, if anybody hits fire 1, which is your left mouse button, then instantiate a rigid body called bullet and transform it forward and add force to it. And that's in a nutshell. So let's go back to Unity for a second. And one of the things you have to do to set this up is you have your player, and I'm going to show you where I got that. Character control, first person player, just drug that onto the screen. And it comes with a main camera. And for the main camera I made a thing called a weapon. Let's zoom in and see that. It's just a box. And then I have a gun tip. And that gun tip, why don't I just make a new gun tip and everything so you guys can see this. So I'm going to delete this. This is my first person. In fact, I'm going to delete everything so you can see the whole deal. So there's my first person player. I'm going to drag him up in the Z if I can get a good line on him. Here we go. We want to get him up out of the ground or he'll just fall through. Now let's go ahead and hit play and see what he's going to do. Okay, so he's running around. That's good. Now I'm going to figure out the direction he's facing. And we'll just go like this. He's facing this direction. I'm going to make for him a little gun. So I'll go to Game Object, Create Other Cube. And we'll just use that as a quick and dirty gun. And rescale that a little bit. In X, Y, and Z until it looks like it could be a stand-in for a gun. And why am I doing this? Because it's fast and it gets the idea across. So if I go to my X and my Y and my Z, I can eventually get this thing to where it's close. And we don't want that to collide with the player, or there's going to be issues. So I'm just going to keep it pretty far away. Then I'm going to go to, why don't we just call that thing gun? And I had to hit return there, and then we're going to go to Game Object, Create Other. No, we're going to go to Game Object, Create Empty. There's my empty game object. That's for the gun tip. We need something for the bullet to come out of. And we don't want anything to collide with anything, so that's why we're using an empty game object. So this will probably work, and I'm going to call that gun tip, for lack of a better name. Then I'm going to make gun a child of main camera. I'm going to make gun tip a child of gun. And there's gun tip. And then I'm going to go to my assets folder and take shooter and make it a child there. And you'll notice that the shooter needs a bullet, needs a rigid body bullet. Well, I happen to have this bullet here, which has a rigid body on it. Can you see that? And it's got a sphere collider because it's really a sphere with a rigid body, and that's all there is to it. So we'll just go to gun tip, we'll throw the bullet on there, and leave everything by default, and hit the play button, and everything's working. So one more thing to be aware of. If I go to my Y here, you'll see that the tip of the gun tip, is pointing the way the bullet would shoot. with the blue arrow. Red, green, blue, so that'd be the Z is pointing out. Okay, so if you have some other thing pointing, you may have to turn it around. I've seen a lot of students do things where they twist the gun at like 7 degrees or whatever, and you don't want to rotate the gun, you don't want to rotate the game object, you want to just let it be straight, because your rotation, your turning and everything is done with the character. Okay, so that's all there is for the shooter. Then we were going to go to this and say that we were going to, in our second slide here, we're going to use hitTarget.js, which is going to destroy the bullet and the game object that this is attached to after 3 seconds. So the bullet will get destroyed after 2 seconds, and the thing that we've attached the script to will be destroyed after 3 seconds. And we're going to set a value of 1, and I'll show you why in just a minute. So let's get this out of the way and make ourselves a target. I'll use a cylinder. And any target that you want to shoot at probably should have a rigid body. So I'm actually going to make a couple of targets at once. So let's get this one out of the way. We'll do component, physics, rigid body. And that's all we should need. Let's just test it and make sure it works. Yeah, so if we can hit it, the rigid body's working. And what I'm going to do is attach this script to it now. So there's my cylinder, and I'm going to call this not just cylinder, but cylinder 1, just so we don't get confused about stuff. And that thing was going to be called hitTarget, right? So cylinder 1 is getting a new script called hitTarget, and let's go ahead and hit play. See what happens when I hit it. Okay, so you can see some things happening. There, all those bullets and the target got deleted. And if I go to my console, you can see that it's showing me that the name of this thing I'm shooting with. It's a bullet clone. So let's go back to our script for a second, and you can see somewhere in here, did I leave that on? Let's go find out. Let's go back to Unity and let's go ahead and clear this out and go to projects, and that thing was hitTarget, right? And let's open that script up in MonoDevelop, and there it is, debug log collision game object name. So what I'm doing there is just getting the name of my collision object, because sometimes you don't know what it is. So we actually don't need that debug anymore, because we found out what the name is, and we're saying if it happens to be a bullet clone, then destroy the bullet and destroy the thing this is attached to and set hit to 1. So everything seems to be working. I'm going to go ahead and save this, and now we're going to go to the next slide, and okay, so that's next slide. Triggering the GUI values. What I want to do here is I want to make a GUI that shows when I've hit the target. Okay, so I'm going to create a GUI text object, and I'm going to attach this code to it called GUI trigger.js. Okay, and then we'll talk about this code in a second. So back into Unity, and we need a GUI object, so we're going to go to game object, create other GUI text, and I think we wanted this to be trigger, right? Wasn't that the name? Let's actually, I'm going to call this GUI target hit, just to be clear about what it's doing. And that's done. We'll go ahead and throw our GUI trigger script onto it, and we'll hit play. Okay, so it does this thing, target hit. Notice that where it's putting the GUI text, it's right in the middle of the screen, maybe not where we want it. So what I'm going to do here while the game's playing is I'm going to change my position. See how I can move this position up here in the transform? And I want this to be like front or top, and Y isn't going to work, and you'll see by just trying it. And we want to use position. Yeah, there it is. Y. I was doing rotation by accident there. So let's turn those back to 0. So it's going to be up there. So what is it? 0.45 and 0.98. So let's stop the game and let's go to that GUI target hit and we'll leave it at 0.5 and then 0.98. And let's play and see if it goes up there and stays up there. Yeah, so that'll work. And so that's really a simple GUI. Let's look at what that script really does. I'll right-click it and go to Edit Script. Okay, so GUI trigger, what does it do? It just has a start that sets the GUI text to nothing, which is quote, quote, which is nothing. And then we have our function update, and I'm saying if you hit the target, if hit target.hit is equal to 1, then get component GUI text equals target hit. So we're just changing what the text says. Now, what it's doing is it's looking at hit target.js. So let's go back to hit target.js. The way this is working is we've got a static variable called hit in hit target.js, and GUI trigger is reading it. So by default it's set to 0, but when we actually hit something with that bullet, whatever the script is attached to, it sets that to 1. Okay, so GUI trigger can read that. Since this hit var is a static var, GUI trigger is able to read static vars. And how does it read it? It goes to the script name and the variable name. And if it's a static var, it can read it. If it's really equal to 1, that is equals 1, then we're going to set the text, GUI text, to target hit. That's all that's happening here. It's about as simple as you can get for reading variables in other programs and getting a GUI result. Okay, so that's the first one, and we're going to go ahead and stop this, and I'll do another one in a few minutes.